"Mom, please come get me. I'm at the police station." My daughter's voice cracked through the phone, thick with tears. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I pulled over immediately. Behind her crying, I could hear the echo of voices and footsteps in what sounded like a busy station. "Esther, what happened? Are you hurt?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "They arrested me, Mom. They say I stole money from Mr. Caldwell's company, $30,000, but I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do anything." My mind raced. Esther had been working as an administrative assistant at Caldwell Investments for 8 months. She was 23, responsible, and had never been in any trouble before. This made no sense. "I'm coming right now. Don't say anything to anyone until I get there." I ended the call and immediately dialed my lawyer friend, Warren Hughes. He answered on the second ring. "Warren, I need your help. My daughter's been arrested for theft." "I'll meet you at the station in 20 minutes, he replied without hesitation. As I drove toward the downtown precinct, something nagged at me. Just last week, Esther had mentioned that her boss's son, Kyle Caldwell, had been making uncomfortable advances toward her. She'd rejected him firmly. Now the timing felt too convenient. "My name is Evelyn Foster, and I'm 47 years old. I raised Esther on my own after her father passed away when she was just 6. For 17 years, it had been just the two of us against the world. I worked as a forensic accountant for Meridian Financial Services. My job involved tracing money trails, uncovering fraud, and documenting financial crimes for legal proceedings. I'd built a reputation for being thorough, and my testimony had helped prosecute dozens of white-collar criminals. The irony wasn't lost on me, that my daughter was now accused of the very thing I spent my career investigating. I pulled into the police station parking lot just as Warren arrived. He was in his early 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. We'd worked together on several cases over the years. "Tell me everything," he said as we walked toward the entrance. "Esther's been working at Caldwell Investments since January. Good performance reviews, no issues. But last week, she told me the owner's son, Kyle, asked her out. She said no. He didn't take it well." Warren's expression hardened. "And now she's accused of stealing from his father's company. $30,000, apparently." "That's convenient timing." He held the door open for me. "Let's see what evidence they think they have." Inside, the station buzzed with activity. Officers moved between desks, phones rang constantly, and the smell of stale coffee filled the air. The desk sergeant directed us to a waiting area. 10 minutes later, a detective approached us. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. "Mrs. Foster, I'm Detective Brandon Pierce. Your daughter is being processed now." "What exactly is she being charged with?" Warren asked, stepping forward with his business card. "I'm her attorney, Warren Hughes." Detective Pierce glanced at the card, then back at us. "Embezzlement. We have bank records showing $30,000 transferred from Caldwell Investments operating account to an account in your daughter's name over the past 2 months." My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "May I see those records?" "You'll get copies during discovery," Pierce replied. "Right now, we're setting bail." "My daughter doesn't have an account with that kind of money," I said firmly. "Someone set this up." "That's what they all say, ma'am." Pierce's tone wasn't unkind, just weary. "The evidence is pretty clear. Multiple transfers, all authorized with her employee login credentials." Warren placed a hand on my arm, warning me to stay quiet. "We'll address this in court. When can we see her?" "Another hour. We're finishing the paperwork now." After Pierce left, I turned to Warren. "Someone framed her. I bet everything I own that Kyle Caldwell is behind this." "Probably," Warren agreed. "But we need proof. Can you look into their financial systems?" I smiled grimly. That's exactly what I plan to do. While we waited, I called my office. My supervisor, Helen Rodriguez, answered immediately. "Helen, I need to take emergency leave. My daughter's in trouble." What kind of trouble? Helen's concern was genuine. She'd known Esther since she was little. She's been arrested for embezzlement. Someone framed her, and I need to prove it. There was a pause. Do what you need to do, Evelyn. Your cases are covered. But be careful. If you're investigating this personally, make sure everything you do is legal. I will, thank you. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and started researching Caldwell Investments. The company had been around for 15 years, managing investment portfolios for wealthy clients. Stanley Caldwell, the owner, had a decent reputation. His son Kyle, however, was a different story. A quick search revealed Kyle had attended 3 different colleges without graduating from any of them. He'd been hired by his father 5 years ago as Vice President of Operations, a title that seemed generous for someone with no actual qualifications. I found his social media profiles next. Photos of expensive cars, luxury vacations, and nightclub appearances filled his pages. In several pictures, young women hung on his arms, different women in nearly every photo. Look at this, I showed Warren a photo from 2 weeks ago. That's from a resort in the Bahamas. That trip probably cost $20,000. Warren leaned closer. So Kyle lives beyond his means, gets rejected by your daughter, and suddenly she's accused of stealing the exact amount he'd need for his lifestyle. Exactly. Esther finally emerged from the back, escorted by a female officer. Her eyes were red and swollen, her professional work clothes now wrinkled and disheveled. When she saw me, fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I wrapped her in my arms, feeling her shake against me. It's okay, sweetheart. We're going to fix this. Mom, I didn't do it. I swear I didn't take that money. I know you didn't. I pulled back to look at her face. Tell me exactly what happened today. We sat in a small conference room while Esther explained. She'd arrived at work that morning to find 2 police officers waiting with her boss, Stanley Caldwell. They'd informed her that an internal audit had discovered missing funds, and all evidence pointed to her. Mr. Caldwell looked shocked, Esther said, wiping her eyes. But Kyle was there too, and he had this smug look on his face, like he was enjoying it. Did Kyle say anything? Warren asked, taking notes. He said, I always knew there was something off about her. Then he told his father that he'd warned him about hearing someone so young and inexperienced. I felt anger burn in my chest. What about the account the money supposedly went to? I've never seen it before. They showed me bank statements with my name on them, but I didn't open that account. Someone forged my signature. Warren looked up from his notes. Did you ever leave your employee login information anywhere? Written down, saved on your computer? No, never. Esther paused, thinking. Wait, about a month ago, Kyle asked to borrow my computer. He said his was updating and he needed to send an urgent email. I logged in for him and stepped away for maybe 10 minutes. There it was, the moment he'd gained access. Warren arranged Esther's bail, and by evening we were finally heading home. My daughter sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Everyone at work probably thinks I'm a thief, she said softly. The people who matter will know the truth, I replied, and we're going to prove your innocence. How? They have bank records with my name. They have transfer logs from my computer. They have fabricated evidence, I corrected, and I'm very good at finding fabrications. At home, I made Esther eat something while I set up my workspace at the dining room table. I pulled up everything I could find about Caldwell Investments' financial structure, their banking relationships, and their internal systems. Warren called around 9. I got the preliminary evidence packet. They're sending it over tomorrow, but I wanted to give you a heads up. The prosecution seems confident. Of course they are. The evidence looks clean on the surface. I scrolled through a document on my screen. But financial fraud always leaves traces, always. What are you thinking? Kyle had access to Esther's login, right? So he could make transfers that looked like they came from her. But banking systems keep metadata, timestamps, IP addresses. If those transfers happened when Esther wasn't even in the office, or from a device that wasn't her work computer, We've got him. Can you get access to that information legally? I can request it through discovery, and I have some contacts at banking institutions who might help. I glanced toward the living room where Esther had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from crying. This is going to be a fight, but we'll win. The next morning, I drove to my office to collect some equipment I'd need. Helen met me at the door. How's Esther holding up? As well as can be expected. I loaded my forensic software onto a portable drive. She's innocent, Helen. Someone set her up, and I'm going to prove it. Helen crossed her arms, her expression worried. Evelyn, you know I support you, but investigating a case where you're personally involved, that's risky. Your findings might not be admissible. Then I'll make sure everything I discover can be independently verified. I zipped my bag closed. I'm not building the case alone. I'm just finding the breadcrumbs for Warren to follow legally. Just be careful. The Caldwells have money and influence. If they realize you're investigating them, they could make things difficult. I thought about Kyle's smug expression when Esther described her arrest. They already made things difficult when they framed my daughter. Back home, I spread the evidence packets across my dining room table. Bank statements, transfer logs, email records. Everything looked damning on the surface. But I'd learned over 20 years in forensic accounting that surface appearance and truth were often very different things. I started with the bank account in Esther's name. It had been opened 3 months ago at Pacific Trust Bank. The signature on the opening documents looked like Esther's, but something about it felt off. I scanned the signature and compared it to Esther's real signature from her driver's license and work documents. Close, but not perfect. The pressure points were different, suggesting someone had traced or practiced copying her signature. That was breadcrumb number 1. Next, I examined the transfer logs. $30,000 had moved from Caldwell Investments to the fake account in 15 separate transactions over 8 weeks. Each transfer was for $2,000, just under the threshold that would trigger automatic fraud alerts at most banks. Smart, but not smart enough. I cross-referenced the timestamps of each transfer with Esther's work schedule, which I'd requested she write down for me. Of the 15 transfers, 7 had occurred on days when Esther had called in sick or taken vacation time. 2 more had happened during lunch hours, but when I checked Esther's credit card records, those same days showed she'd been at restaurants across town, far from the office. Mom, Esther appeared in the doorway, looking more rested after a full night's sleep. What did you find? Come look at this. I showed her the timeline I'd created. These transfers happened when you weren't even in the building. Her eyes widened. So that proves it wasn't me, right? It's a start, but we need to prove who actually made the transfers. I pulled up another document. Tell me about Kyle's office setup. Does he have his own computer? Yes, but he also has access to all the administrative computers. He's the VP of operations, so the system gives him override access to everything. Perfect. I made a note. That means he could have used your login from his own computer or from any terminal in the building. How do we prove he did it, though? Every computer has a unique identifier, like a fingerprint. If we can get the IP addresses or device IDs from the bank's transaction logs, we can trace exactly which computer made these transfers. Esther's expression shifted from despair to hope. Can you get that information? Warren can subpoena it through the court, and I have a contact at Pacific Trust Bank who might help expedite things. I called Thomas Wu, a banking security director I'd worked with on several fraud cases. He answered cheerfully. Evelyn Foster, it's been months. What can I do for you? I need a favor, Thomas. My daughter's been framed for embezzlement, and Pacific Trust Bank is involved. His tone shifted to serious immediately. Tell me everything. I explained the situation, including the suspicious account and the transfer patterns. Thomas listened without interrupting. Send me the account number, he said. I can't give you protected information directly, but I can flag the account for our internal fraud investigation team. If there are irregularities, they'll find them. That's all I need. Thank you, Thomas. One more thing, he added. If this account was opened with a forged signature, we take that very seriously. Identity theft and fraud are crimes we prosecute aggressively. Your daughter might not be the only victim here. After the call, I felt momentum building. Warren arrived an hour later with more news. I filed a motion for full discovery, including all digital evidence, he said, settling into a chair at my evidence-covered table. The prosecutor wasn't happy, but the judge granted it. We'll have access to the bank's transaction metadata by next week. Good, because I'm building a timeline that shows 7 of these transfers happened when Esther wasn't in the office. I showed him my work, and my contact at the bank is opening an internal fraud investigation. Warren smiled. You work fast. My daughter's freedom is at stake. I don't have time to work slowly. Over the next 3 days, I dove deeper into Caldwell Investments' financial records. What I found surprised me. The company's accounts showed consistent withdrawals over the past year, all marked as operational expenses. But when I compared them to the company's actual operational costs, rent, utilities, salaries, the numbers didn't match. Someone had been skimming money for months. And it wasn't Esther. She'd only been working there for 8 months. I created a detailed spreadsheet tracking every suspicious withdrawal. The pattern was clear: small amounts, taken regularly, from multiple accounts. Over the past year, approximately $200,000 had disappeared from Caldwell Investments. Look at this, I called Warren over to my laptop. Kyle's been embezzling from his own father's company for over a year. The $30,000 pinned on Esther is just the tip of the iceberg. Warren studied the screen, his expression darkening. So when the company started an internal audit and got close to discovering the truth, Kyle created a scapegoat. Exactly. He used Esther's login to make recent transfers, created a fake account in her name, and made sure the audit found her instead of him. Can you prove Kyle made the other withdrawals? I can prove the pattern existed before Esther was hired, and once we get the device IDs from the bank, we can match them to Kyle's computer. I leaned back in my chair. He's not as smart as he thinks he is. No criminal ever is, Warren replied. But we need to be careful about how we present this. Stanley Caldwell is the victim here too. His son has been stealing from him. I thought about that. Maybe Stanley doesn't know, or maybe he suspects but doesn't want to admit his son is a thief. The following Monday, Warren received the bank's metadata records. We met at his office to review them together. Here, he pointed to a column of numbers on the screen. These are the device IDs for each transaction. They show exactly which computer was used to authorize each transfer. I compared them to the list Esther had given me of all computers in the Caldwell Investments office. Each device had a unique network identifier. 12 of the 15 transfers had been made from device ID ending in 4892. What computer is that? Warren asked. I checked my notes. Kyle Caldwell's personal laptop, the one registered to him as VP of Operations. Warren sat back in his chair, a satisfied smile crossing his face. We've got him. 3 transfers came from different devices, though. I highlighted them. These were made from administrative terminals in the main office. Probably when Esther was away, and Kyle used her computer directly. Either way, her home computer never touched any of these transactions. I felt relief wash over me. So we can prove she didn't do this. Better than that, we can prove Kyle did. Warren started typing notes. I'll file a motion to dismiss charges against Esther and request the police investigate Kyle Caldwell for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. What about the money he stole before framing Esther? The $200,000. That becomes evidence in a larger case against him. Stanley Caldwell will have to decide whether to press charges against his own son. I thought about Stanley's shocked expression when Esther described her arrest. He didn't know. Kyle's been stealing from his father, and when he almost got caught, he sacrificed an innocent woman to save himself. Men like Kyle always sacrifice others, Warren said quietly. They never take responsibility. 2 days later, Warren presented our evidence to the prosecutor. I waited at home with Esther, both of us too nervous to do anything productive. When Warren finally called, his voice was triumphant. Charges against Esther are being dropped. The prosecutor reviewed our evidence and agreed there's reasonable doubt. Esther burst into tears of relief. I felt my own eyes water as I hugged her. "What about Kyle?" I asked Warren. "The prosecutor is opening an investigation. With the device ID evidence and the banking records, they have probable cause for fraud charges. Police are executing a search warrant at Caldwell Investments right now." "Stanley Caldwell is going to be devastated." "Maybe, but he deserves to know the truth about his son." After hanging up, I held Esther while she cried happy tears. "It's over, sweetheart. You're cleared." "I can't believe you did it, Mom. You proved I was innocent." "I just followed the evidence. The truth was always there, waiting to be found." I pulled back to look at her. "But Esther, you need to understand something. Kyle targeted you because he thought you were vulnerable. Young, alone, easy to frame. He didn't expect you to have someone who would fight for you." "I'll never forget what you did." "Good, and when you're my age and someone you love needs help, you'll do the same thing." I smiled. "That's how we survive, by standing up for each other." The news broke the next morning. Local media reported that Kyle Caldwell had been arrested for embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft. The story mentioned that charges against a former employee had been dropped after new evidence came to light. My phone rang constantly. Friends calling to congratulate us, former colleagues asking if I needed help, and reporters seeking comments. I declined all media requests. This wasn't about publicity. It was about justice. Stanley Caldwell called my cell phone around noon. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mrs. Foster, this is Stanley Caldwell. I owe you and your daughter an enormous apology." His voice was heavy with shame and exhaustion. I could picture him in his office, processing the betrayal by his own son. "Mr. Caldwell, I appreciate that. I had no idea Kyle was stealing from me. When the audit showed money missing and evidence pointed to Esther, I believed it. I should have investigated more thoroughly." "You trusted your son. That's natural." "My trust was misplaced." He sighed deeply. "I've reviewed all the evidence your attorney provided. Kyle used Esther to cover his crimes. He's been stealing from me for over a year, and when he realized I was getting close to discovering it, he created a scapegoat." "Yes, that's exactly what happened. I want to make this right. Esther's job is waiting for her if she wants it back, with a significant raise and a formal apology from me." I thought about that. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Caldwell, but I think Esther needs a fresh start somewhere else. Working at your company after everything that's happened wouldn't be healthy for her." "I understand. Then please accept a settlement for the distress we caused. My attorney will contact yours." After the call ended, I sat quietly, processing everything. Kyle had destroyed his relationship with his father, his freedom, and his future, all because he couldn't control his spending and couldn't accept rejection. Warren called that afternoon with updates. "Kyle's bail hearing is tomorrow. The prosecutor is arguing he's a flight risk given the amount of money involved." "Good. What about the charges?" "Multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, and forgery. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at 15 to 20 years. I felt no satisfaction in Kyle's potential prison sentence, only relief that Esther was safe. "Has he said anything?" "His lawyer is claiming it's all a misunderstanding. That Esther was actually involved and is using her mother's connections to frame him." I laughed bitterly. "Of course he is. Blame the victim until the very end." "It won't work. The device ID evidence is too strong. Every single transfer came from his computer or from terminals when Esther wasn't in the building. The bank's fraud investigation confirmed the account in her name was opened with a forged signature. Kyle is finished." "What happens next?" "The prosecutor offered him a plea deal. Plead guilty to the embezzlement charges, return the money, and accept a 10-year sentence. If he refuses and goes to trial, They'll pursue maximum sentences on all counts. Will he take the deal? His lawyer is recommending it, but Kyle's ego is massive. He might actually believe he can win at trial. I hoped he'd be that stupid. A trial would mean public testimony, media coverage, and complete destruction of whatever reputation he had left. The humiliation would be fitting justice. Esther received a formal apology letter from Stanley Caldwell 2 days later. It was handwritten, 3 pages long, expressing his deep regret for not protecting her and for believing his son over evidence. "He sounds genuinely sorry," Esther said, reading it for the 3rd time. "He probably is, but sorry doesn't undo the trauma of being arrested and accused." "No, but it helps." She folded the letter carefully. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about how Kyle targeted me because he thought I was vulnerable. You're not vulnerable, sweetheart. You're strong. I am now, but I wasn't before. I didn't know how to stand up for myself when Kyle made advances. I just tried to ignore it and hoped it would stop." I sat beside her on the couch. "What happened to you wasn't your fault. Kyle is a predator who used his position and his father's company to hurt people." "I know, but I also know I need to be stronger. I need to learn how to recognize people like him and protect myself." "That's wisdom, Esther, and it comes from surviving something hard." She leaned against my shoulder. "I want to do what you do, Mom. I want to learn forensic accounting. I want to help people who have been cheated or framed." Pride swelled in my chest. "Then that's what we'll do. You can start by learning the tools I used to clear your name." Over the next week, I taught Esther the basics of financial investigation. How to spot inconsistencies in records, how to trace money trails, how to build evidence timelines. She absorbed everything like a sponge, asking sharp questions and making connections I hadn't expected. "You're a natural at this," I told her after she identified a suspicious pattern in practice data I'd given her. "I'm motivated. I never want to feel helpless like that again." Kyle's trial date was set for 3 months away. His lawyer had rejected the plea deal, apparently convinced they could create reasonable doubt. Warren wasn't worried. "Let them try. We have overwhelming evidence." Thomas Wu from Pacific Trust Bank called with additional information. "Our fraud investigation uncovered something interesting. Kyle opened 4 other fake accounts using stolen identities over the past year. He's been running a sophisticated embezzlement scheme." 4 other accounts. Who did he impersonate? 3 former employees and 1 current vendor. All people who wouldn't immediately notice small withdrawals from accounts they didn't know existed. So Esther wasn't his first victim. Not even close. He's been perfecting this scheme for years, probably. Your daughter just happened to be the scapegoat when everything started unraveling. I thanked Thomas and immediately called Warren with the new information. This changed everything. Kyle wasn't just an opportunistic thief, he was a serial fraudster. "The prosecutor will love this," Warren said. "It establishes a pattern of behavior and shows premeditation. Kyle's lawyer is going to have a very bad day when this comes out." Good. That evening, I took Esther out for dinner at her favorite restaurant. We sat outside on the patio, enjoying the warm evening and the normalcy of just being together without the weight of criminal charges hanging over us. "I got a call today," Esther said, twirling pasta on her fork. "From a woman named Rita Lawson. She said she used to work at Caldwell Investments 3 years ago." "What did she want?" "She saw the news about Kyle's arrest. She told me that he did the same thing to her." I set down my fork. "He framed her for theft." "Not exactly. He harassed her for months, making advances she rejected. Then she started having performance issues, missed meetings, lost documents. She thought she was losing her mind. Eventually, she was fired for incompetence." "Let me guess, Kyle sabotaged her work." "That's what she thinks now, looking back. She said she never had proof, so she just left quietly. But seeing what he did to me made everything make sense." I reached out to Rita Lawson the next day. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. Rita was in her early 30s, professionally dressed, with tired eyes that suggested she'd carried this burden for a long time. We sat in a quiet corner while she told me her story. "I was 26 when I started at Caldwell Investments," she began. "Kyle asked me out within the first month. I said no politely, but he kept pushing. It got uncomfortable fast." "Did you report it?" "To who? Stanley. That's his son, HR. Kyle had friends there." She stirred her coffee absently. "I thought I could handle it, just avoid him, do my job, eventually he'd lose interest." "But he didn't." "No. Instead, strange things started happening. Files I'd saved would disappear from my computer. Meetings I'd confirmed would be canceled without my knowledge. Clients complained. I hadn't returned calls I never received. Kyle was sabotaging you. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought I was making mistakes, that maybe I wasn't good at my job after all. My confidence collapsed. After 6 months of this, Stanley called me into his office and fired me for incompetence. I felt anger burn in my chest. Kyle destroyed your career because you rejected him. Yes, and I just accepted it because I didn't have proof. Rita met my eyes. When I saw the news about your daughter, everything clicked. Kyle has been doing this for years. I'm probably not the only one. You're not. The bank discovered he'd stolen identities from 3 other former employees. Rita's expression hardened. Then he needs to be stopped permanently. I want to help. I'll testify about what he did to me if it helps build the case against him. I called Warren immediately. Warren was thrilled with Rita's testimony. This establishes a pattern of retaliation against women who reject him. Combined with the financial crimes, it paints a picture of a serial predator. How many more victims are there? I wondered aloud. We're about to find out. Warren contacted 3 other former employees whose identities Kyle had stolen. 2 agreed to speak with us. Both had stories similar to Rita's, harassment followed by mysterious work problems that led to their termination. The 3rd victim, Brenda Kim, had a different experience. Kyle had convinced her to go on a date with him, then bragged to coworkers that they were in a relationship. When Brenda tried to correct the record, saying it was just one date and she wasn't interested in pursuing anything further, Kyle became vindictive. He told Stanley I was stealing office supplies, Brenda explained during our phone conversation. Stanley didn't fire me, but Kyle made my work life miserable afterward. I quit within 2 months. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry it happened to your daughter. At least she has you fighting for her. I didn't have anyone. After documenting all the victims' stories, Warren compiled a comprehensive brief for the prosecutor. The case against Kyle had evolved from simple embezzlement to a pattern of predatory behavior spanning years. This is going to destroy him, Warren said with satisfaction. The media is going to have a field day when all this comes out. I thought about Stanley Caldwell discovering the full extent of his son's crimes. The man was about to learn that Kyle hadn't just stolen money, he'd harassed and destroyed the careers of multiple young women. Stanley needs to know everything before it becomes public, I said. Warren nodded. I'll arrange a meeting. Stanley Caldwell sat across from us in Warren's conference room, his face gray with shock, as we presented the evidence of Kyle's years-long pattern of harassment and retaliation. I had no idea, he said quietly, his hands shaking slightly. All those women who left, I thought they just weren't good fits for the company. Kyle made sure you thought that, Warren explained gently. He systematically sabotaged their work to make them look incompetent. And the ones who were fired. Kyle convinced you they were problems. You trusted your son's judgment. Stanley buried his face in his hands. I've been so blind. How could I not see what he was doing? He's your son, I said. Parents want to believe the best about their children. There's no excuse for this. None. Stanley looked up, his eyes red. I want to make this right. I'll contact every woman Kyle hurt and offer whatever compensation or support they need. References, settlements, anything. That's generous of you, Warren said. But right now, the most important thing you can do is cooperate fully with the prosecution. Your testimony about Kyle's access to company systems will help ensure he's convicted. I'll do whatever it takes. Kyle needs to face the consequences of what he's done. After Stanley left, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction that justice was being served, but also sadness for a father who had to watch his son's true nature be exposed. "Do you think Kyle has any idea how much evidence is against him?" I asked Warren. "If he does, he's in denial. His lawyer tried to contact me about a new plea deal, but the prosecutor isn't interested anymore. Kyle's going to trial, and he's going to lose." The trial began on a cold Monday morning in November, 4 months after Esther's arrest. The courtroom was packed with media, curious observers, and several of Kyle's victims who had come to watch justice unfold. Esther sat beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly. Warren sat at the prosecution table as a witness consultant, having worked closely with the district attorney's office on the case. Kyle entered wearing an expensive suit, his expression arrogant despite the serious charges against him. He didn't even glance toward where Esther and I sat. The prosecutor's opening statement was devastating. She laid out the timeline of Kyle's crimes, the systematic embezzlement, the identity theft, the harassment, and the ultimate framing of Esther when he feared being caught. Kyle's defense attorney tried to paint him as a son who had made mistakes while trying to help his father's struggling company. But the evidence made that narrative impossible to sustain. Over the next 2 weeks, witness after witness took the stand. Bank officials testified about the fake accounts and forged signatures. Digital forensics experts explained the device ID evidence that proved Kyle had made the transfers from his own computer. Former employees described his pattern of harassment and retaliation. Esther testified on day 7. She spoke clearly and confidently about Kyle's advances, her rejection of him, and the shock of being arrested for crimes she didn't commit. When Kyle's lawyer tried to suggest she had welcomed his attention, Warren objected so forcefully that the judge sustained it immediately. "Your Honor," Warren said, "the defense is victim blaming. There is no evidence Miss Foster ever encouraged Mr. Caldwell's advances." The judge agreed, warning Kyle's lawyer to change his approach. I testified on day 9, explaining the forensic investigation that had uncovered the truth. I walked the jury through the timeline, the device IDs, the banking records, and the pattern of suspicious activity that predated Esther's employment. "Mrs. Foster," the prosecutor asked, "in your professional opinion as a forensic accountant with 20 years of experience, did your daughter commit these crimes?" "Absolutely not. The evidence clearly shows she was framed." "And who does the evidence point to?" I looked directly at Kyle. Kyle Caldwell. He had motive, means, and opportunity. He used his position to access his father's accounts, his technical knowledge to cover his tracks, and my daughter's credentials to create a scapegoat when he realized he was about to be caught. Kyle's lawyer tried to suggest I was biased because Esther was my daughter, but I shut that down quickly. I'm a professional who has testified in dozens of fraud cases. My analysis is based on evidence, not emotion. The fact that the victim is my daughter doesn't change what the data shows. Stanley Caldwell testified on day 11, and his testimony was heartbreaking. He described discovering his son had been stealing from him for years, the betrayal he felt, and his regret for not protecting the employees Kyle had harmed. "I trusted my son completely," Stanley said, his voice breaking. "He used that trust to steal from me and to hurt innocent people. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life." The defense tried to suggest Stanley was turning on Kyle to protect the company's reputation, but his genuine emotion made that argument fall flat. Kyle decided to testify in his own defense against his lawyer's advice. It was a disaster. The prosecutor demolished him during cross-examination, pointing out inconsistencies in his story, confronting him with his own emails and text messages, and methodically proving he had lied about nearly everything. "Mr. Caldwell, you testified that you barely knew Miss Foster. Is that correct?" "Yes, we worked in the same building but weren't close." "Then explain this text message from your phone to a friend, dated 3 weeks before Miss Foster's arrest." The prosecutor displayed it on the courtroom screen. It says, Esther rejected me again. She's going to regret it. Kyle's face flushed red. That was taken out of context. What context makes a threat like that acceptable? It wasn't a threat. I was just venting to a friend. By saying she would regret rejecting you. What did you mean by that, Mr. Caldwell? Kyle stammered, unable to provide a coherent answer. His lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The prosecutor continued, and this email from your account to yourself, sent the day before Miss Foster's arrest. You wrote, everything is in place. The account is ready, transfers complete. She'll be the perfect scapegoat. Did you write that? No, someone must have hacked my email. Someone hacked your email to frame you for framing Miss Foster. The prosecutor's tone dripped with skepticism. That seems unlikely, doesn't it? The jury's expressions showed they agreed. Kyle was caught in his own lies. Closing arguments took place on a Friday afternoon. The prosecutor summarized the overwhelming evidence against Kyle. Device IDs proving he made the transfers, forged signatures on fake accounts, testimony from multiple victims establishing his pattern of retaliation, and his own incriminating messages. Kyle Caldwell is not a victim of circumstance, she concluded. He is a calculating predator who stole from his own father, destroyed careers of women who rejected him, and tried to send an innocent young woman to prison to cover his crimes. The evidence is clear. Find him guilty on all counts. Kyle's defense attorney did his best, arguing the evidence was circumstantial and that Kyle had been scapegoated by a vindictive former employee and her powerful mother. But even he seemed to know it was hopeless. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, I held Esther's hand tightly. The foreperson stood, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. On the count of embezzlement, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of identity theft? Guilty. Count after count, guilty on all charges. Kyle's face went white. His lawyer slumped in his chair. Stanley Caldwell, sitting behind the prosecution table, dropped his head into his hands. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I gave a brief statement thanking the prosecutor's office and the jury for seeing the truth. Esther stood beside me, her head high, vindicated at last. How do you feel, Miss Foster? A reporter called. Relieved, Esther answered, and grateful to my mother for never doubting me. Kyle's sentencing hearing took place 3 weeks later. The judge heard statements from multiple victims before delivering her decision. Rita Lawson spoke about the career damage and loss of confidence she'd suffered. Brenda Kim described the anxiety and self-doubt Kyle's actions had caused. Esther gave a powerful statement about the trauma of being arrested and the fear of losing her freedom for crimes she didn't commit. Kyle Caldwell's actions destroyed lives, she concluded. He deserves the maximum sentence. I also spoke, not as Esther's mother, but as a forensic accountant who had seen countless financial predators. People like Mr. Caldwell view others as tools to be used and discarded. He has shown no remorse, no accountability, and no understanding of the harm he's caused. He is a danger to any organization or person he encounters. Kyle's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, citing Kyle's youth and potential for rehabilitation. But the judge wasn't moved. Mr. Caldwell, you've been convicted of serious crimes involving betrayal of trust, financial fraud, and systematic harassment. Your actions have harmed multiple victims over several years. I see no evidence of remorse or acceptance of responsibility. She sentenced him to 18 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 10 years. As Kyle was led away in handcuffs, he finally looked toward where Esther and I sat. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The reality of his situation had finally penetrated his arrogance. Stanley Caldwell approached us after the hearing ended. Thank you, he said simply, for fighting for the truth. I'm only sorry it took so long. Justice delayed is still justice, I replied. 6 months later, Esther enrolled in a forensic accounting program at the university. She had found her calling, helping others who had been victimized by financial crimes. I went back to my regular work, but with renewed purpose. Esther's case had reminded me why I'd chosen this career, to protect the vulnerable and expose the truth. Stanley Caldwell sold Caldwell Investments and used part of the proceeds to establish a fund for Kyle's victims, providing financial support and career counseling. It didn't undo the damage, but it helped. Rita Lawson started a nonprofit supporting women who experienced workplace harassment. Brenda Kim became an advocate for stronger corporate accountability policies. Each woman transformed her trauma into purpose. One evening, Esther and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset. She was studying case files for her program, already showing the sharp analytical skills that would make her excellent at this work. "Mom," she said suddenly, "I never thanked you properly for what you did. You saved my life. You would have done the same for me." "I hope so. I hope I'm half as strong as you when someone I love needs me." I smiled, putting my arm around her shoulders. "You already are, sweetheart. You stood up in that courtroom and told your truth even though it was terrifying. That's the strongest thing anyone can do. I learned it from you." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Kyle Caldwell was in prison where he belonged. Esther was free and building a future. Justice had prevailed. And that phone call from the police station, the one that had started this nightmare, had ultimately led to something good. It had shown us both that we were stronger than we knew, that truth always finds a way to surface, and that standing up for what's right is always worth the fight.